What's up to all my Cormac McCarthy fans out there? Today we are talking about two goats in late 20th century literature, Mr. Roberto Bolaño and of course Cormac McCarthy. And Bolaño was a big fan of Cormac McCarthy and wrote a short piece on Blood Meridian that we are going to be talking about today. And Bolaño and McCarthy have very divergent writing styles and share very little in common, except that, first of all, they both write about the Sonoran region of Mexico, and both, you could say, exist in kind of the high level of literary fiction. They are pushing the limits. They lived the life of a writer. They suffered through poverty to be able to get good over the course of decades, and it shows. And another thing that connects them is that lit bros have been salivating over McCarthy and Bolaño for the past 15 years or so. Really, both have had a resurgence over the last 15 years, and it's very cringe and also very great to watch at the same time, but both seem to produce the kind of incel-y characters that we don't need any more of those type of guys in the literature community. So without any further ado, Griselda and I, as she's napping on my lap, are going to read to you guys Roberto Bolaño on Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian is a Western, a cowboy novel by a writer who seems to specialize in the genre. Many enterprising types thought that Cormac McCarthy would never be translated into Spanish, and they ransacked him shamelessly, abetted by ignorance and a rather curious understanding of intertextuality. And yet Blood Meridian, set in the mid-19th century, isn't just a Western, but also a fevered, ultra-violent novel about life and death. With all kinds of underlining themes, nature as man's great enemy, the absolute impossibility of redemption, life as inertia. A novel that, in part, tells the story of a group of Americans who launch a murderous raid into the state of Chihuahua and then, after crossing the Sierra Madres, into the neighboring state of Sonora, and whose mission, for which they are well compensated by the governments of both states, is to hunt down and scalp Indians, which isn't just difficult, but also costly in time and lives. And so they end up massacring whole Mexican towns where the scalps are ultimately similar enough that it makes no difference. Blood Meridian is also a novel about place, about the landscape of Texas and Chihuahua and Sonora, a kind of anti-pastoral novel in which the landscape looms in its leading role, imposingly. Truly the New World, silent and paradigmatic and hideous, with room for everything except human beings. It could be said that the landscape of Blood Meridian is a landscape out of Desaad, a thirsty and indifferent landscape ruled by strange laws involving pain and anesthesia, the laws by which time often manifests itself. The other two characters in the novel, Judge Holden and a boy known only as a kid, are antagonists, though they belong to the same gang. The judge is a learned man and a child killer, a musician and a pederast, a naturalist and a gunslinger, a man who yearns to know everything and destroy everything. The kid, by contrast, is a survivor. He's wild, but he's a human being, or in other words, a victim. According to the distinguished Harold Bloom, Blood Meridian is one of the best American novels of the 20th century. So, Mr. Bolaño did not give me very much to work with, but there are some things in there. First of all, at the start, there are certain sects of Latin America that are obviously not fans of Cormac McCarthy's work. They think that he is glorifying violence against the indigenous people and that he is just a crotchety old white man who's just spreading imperialistic ideas. And that actually held for a while, and there were debates about it. But there was actually a conference that was held down in Mexico on Cormac McCarthy, and there was like a bunch of panelists speaking, and they were all Hispanic, and they all concluded that McCarthy should be like an honorary Hispanic, like they were going to give him the badge because of how well he wrote about Mexico in the Border Trilogy and Blood Meridian and even The Counselor, at times No Country for Old Men. And I think that's it. He captures it very beautifully, and at some levels has the greatest prose, landscape prose on northern Mexico of anyone. And this is something that Bolaño also had to deal with kind of these highbrow literary figures trying to hold him down. And that's why he fled to Europe for a while, because as we was hinted at in All the Pretty Horses, politics in Mexico have been very wild. I mean, since the independence, if you read about it and see about it now with the cartels and everything, it has not been a steady ride for Mexico. And so in that tumultuousness, there is hatred, especially hatred against outsiders who are trying to capture the culture and whatnot. This is very common also in America, in small towns, if you live in a small town, and their attitude toward outsiders. So I think Bolaño gets a lot of this wrong because I really don't feel like this novel's themes are nature is man's greatest enemy. I feel like McCarthy, with the way he writes, almost gives nature some form of sentience. Yes, it is the desert. Yes, it is very hard, and like people are dying. But those are kind of passerby thoughts at like the very base level of the novel. I mean, I don't think he was reading secondary sources, because the world could be seen as the illusionary creation of the demiurge, which McCarthy was trying to get at with, Blood Meridian's Gnosticism. That's not mentioned. Bolano also mentions the absolute impossibility of redemption, which is also really not too accurate, because the epilogue does show a chance for redemption, and obviously the kid is someone who's bringing salvation to the world, because there is massive differences between Gnosticism and general Christianity. And I get all these comments all the time of people applying like pure Christian lenses to Blood Meridian, even though McCarthy was not doing that. And the only reason they are doing that is because they are unwilling, or I guess just maybe don't know yet, that this is a Gnostic novel, among many other things, but is not a very traditional Christian novel. So there is actually a possibility of redemption. And the kid actually came in on the meteors. That's kind of what's implied, because it's mirrored at the end of the novel with the meteor shower, that he's kind of leaving the world. And then in the epilogue, it's kind of more salvation, more progress happening, hopefully towards something bigger. I mean, it could be read in a lot of different ways, but the general consensus from a lot of different scholars is it's something of that vein. It's not the kid is Jesus and Holden is Lucifer. Like that's like, super grade school. And then the last one, Life is Inertia. I would say that is accurate. I would say that, just kind of temporary, repetitive, nothing really changing. That's an accurate assessment, because war continues. Even in the epilogue, we could see that, the railroad and in the coming world is going to just, be as brutal as the 19th century was. So I would say that's accurate. But the rest of the piece, it's really just a summary. And this was meant for a magazine to kind of tell people about the book. But I would work a little bit harder to sell the novel. I mean, let me just be honest here. But I do commend Bolano, because something that people don't really do anymore is write about books. A lot of authors and stuff maybe give a little bit of a blurb, but authors and people even talking about books used to be an art form. Like people for a long time used to talk about other works, like, fiction authors and whatnot. And there was a big tradition of this for a while, even in American poetry, of criticism. And criticism isn't, literary criticism isn't just putting things down, but also lifting things up. And for instance, like a guy like Harold Bloom, he was trying to elevate literature, and Bolano is here doing something similar. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to elevate books. And I know sometimes I trash talk, I'm trashing Bolano a little bit, but he's a great author and you should read him. And this piece, I'm sure, helped people get to Blood Meridian and to other McCarthy works and send them down a rabbit hole, which is a good thing. And even today, it's still sparking discussion. And that's something that you can do. It's not very hard, because most writers, obviously are spending a lot of their time writing the novels, but it's not too hard to go out there on a limb. But writers kind of don't want to polarize, because to criticize, to put yourself out there, requires sometimes to put things down, because you have to say like, book talk, books suck. A lot of the stuff being pushed now is, for diversity quotas and is meant for a dumb audience who doesn't know how to read very well and just wants to, be taken away by sensational stories that have no deeper substance or form. So I commend Bolano for doing this, even though I wish there was some more detail and some more ideas. I wish there were, and like I said, this is like something McCarthy, like people talking about books, them like, here I am. A lot of this show is me like talking about McCarthy's influences, but they're so vague. It's a couple lines that he wrote in a diary and box 48 in the archive, and it kind of sucks. And that's why I'm starting to make a lot of David Foster Wallace videos, because as you saw with my Cormac McCarthy and David Foster Wallace video, that he said a lot. There's a lot to go off of with him and McCarthy. And when I look back on the legacy I want to leave as not just someone who speaks about books, but who also writes books, I want it to be very balanced. So what did you guys think about Bolano? What do you think of Bolano? Because like I said, not too much is in here. And thank you guys for being here, and I will see you guys in the next video.